Vetrano back here for your deep state debriefing. What we're talking about this week is White House renovations, because a lot of people are up in arms over Donald Trump's plans to change the White House. So I did a little bit of homework to go find out what kind of renovations and changes have happened in the White House over the years. And some are significant. You really would not believe these things if you haven't studied it yourself. So first thing I'll tell you, if you look at a picture of the original White House, it looks entirely different than it does today. You probably wouldn't recognize it because it was a story shorter and didn't have the wings and didn't have the portico entrances that it has on both sides now. So let me tell you, the White House built in 1802, okay? And then it was burned down by the British in 1814 during the War of 1812. Apparently, everything inside was burned and destroyed, but the structure itself was okay, mostly. There was a few artifacts that were taken out and saved, but most everything else that was in there was destroyed. So, spent a decade rebuilding the White House. 1830, James Madison's the president. He added the big porticos. It's on the north and the south side. Those are the big columns, the curved entrances that people go through. That didn't used to be part of the original building, but now that's what gives it the look that it has. In 1881, Chester Arthur went with the Victorian theme. He had a custom-made Tiffany glass wall, a partition that rolled to separate two large rooms. Also, this is interesting, he took old furniture and stuff, artifacts that didn't want in the White House, and they put it out front and had a public auction. People off the street could come up to the White House and bid in an auction and buy tables, chairs, desks, lamps, paintings from the White House. That's kind of hard to believe that you just auction off White House artifacts on the front lawn, but that's what happened in 1881. So Teddy Roosevelt moved in the White House in 1902, but Teddy Roosevelt had 6 kids. There wasn't enough room for them in the White House with the staff in his office. So he had the West Wing be created, built that so that there was a hallway with offices so White House staff could work in there and his assistants, and his kids could sleep in bedrooms that were converted from previous office space. So he expanded it because he had a large family. What he also did was take out all the changes of Victorian stuff that Chester Arthur put in 20 years earlier. I think that's kind of funny. He just undid all of that. And you wonder where a Tiffany stained glass custom wall is that used to be in the White House. I'm not sure where that's at. William Howard Taft, that was the big heavy president they talked about that was stuck in a bathtub because he was too fat to get out. He moved in 1909. So he expanded the West Wing, added more office space, and he did not like the rectangular office he had in the middle of the White House. So he had a new, part of his expansion, a new Oval Office built. So there did not used to be an Oval Office until President Taft came along. And it's funny about him being stuck in the bathtub, too hard to take a bath. So little fact, people don't know, he had an indoor swimming pool put in. That was also in the West Wing. Indoor swimming pool, because that was easier than being in a bathtub. The pool got closed, I think, in the 1940s, and it was covered up, and I understand that today that is underneath the White House briefing room, where they stand at the podium with all the reporters. Underneath that was the old in-ground swimming pool. No one ever knew that used to exist. So Calvin Coolidge was president in 1927. They determined that the attic on the second floor and the roof was starting to leak, but the attic was sagging because all the artifacts, paper, they had to keep documents, right? They weren't electronic back then. All the papers, signed letters, copies of stuff was all put in the attic, but it was weighing too much and the attic was starting to sag and creak. So they had to rebuild the attic and fix the roof. So he decided just to add a whole 3rd floor. So it used to be a 2-story building. They added a 3rd floor that was offices for more staff and especially a housekeeping staff. That's where their offices and supplies and stuff were. Then a new roof on top. So the building grew from 2 to 3 stories under Calvin Coolidge in 1927. In 1948, Harry Truman is president. They're looking around the White House and realize this needs some major upgrades or overhaul because the building was 150 years old by then. After it had been built, they added plumbing. After it had been built, they added central heat and air. After it was built, they added electricity. After it was built, they added gas. So you see what's going on? All these add-ons that were done, and they said, this whole thing's a wreck. It needs to just be redone. So he moved out of the White House across the street where the vice president normally lives and stayed there for 4 years while the whole White House was gutted except for the exterior. There was no function anywhere in that building. Everybody else worked remotely, plenty of remote work 80 years ago. So they spent 4 years renovating the whole thing so it was back to usable condition again. Richard Nixon, 1972, he added a bowling alley. He wanted to bowl. It had one lane, but he added a bowling alley. Jimmy Carter in 1979 added solar panels to the roof to heat up water because solar was brand new emerging technology and he wanted to show his leadership. So they put solar panels on the roof. When Ronald Reagan got into the White House a year later, he took the solar panels off the roof. George Bush later, George W. Bush, the second George Bush, reinstalled the solar panels. I don't know if they're still there or not, but it's just kind of funny, these little changes they're making. Barack Obama, when he was president in 2013, he added a basketball court. He wanted to play basketball, okay. He also renovated the whole Oval Office, and it was kind of a pretty bad design at the time, that everything was a taupe colored. It was all just bland, soft, light brown. It all looked like just a hotel room, just a meeting space in a hotel room. It was pretty bad, and that stayed for a while until Donald Trump came in and he went back to the original design based off of pictures, so there's a little more color and stuff, and it's not all just plain taupe again. So let's talk about first ladies and what they've done. Jackie Kennedy created the Rose Garden outside that people are used to. She also, Donald Trump recently paved over, that's another story, but she also wanted the White House to be a living museum to showcase its 200-year history. So she had things brought out from storage that were period pieces that would show history over time, and any new stuff was gone. So it became a living museum under her. Lyndon Johnson's wife, Lady Bird Johnson, redid the East Garden. She made a whole big pretty garden out there. Michelle Obama, this is cool, she created the kitchen garden, which is where vegetable stuff were grown naturally so that they can be used in the White House kitchen. That's a pretty cool idea. That still exists. So I'm going through here is letting you know that there's been a lot of change. The building's got bigger, it's gotten wider, they've added different wings. By the way, the East Wing I didn't mention was built because a bunker was built out there in World War II for the president's stuff in case there were German attacks, something on the East Coast, and they had to seek shelter. So they put that out there, then finally covered it up so there wasn't just a bunker in the ground for the president. So there became a whole hallway and all that. But that brings us to where we are now with the big stink over Donald Trump's ballroom. So this started out as a $200 million ballroom that's going to seat 650 guests. And what they'd said in their plans even a month ago was this would go next to the East Wing, but it's not going to affect the East Wing. Well, there was a change a week ago, and they decided they need a 1,000-seat ballroom. Now it's bigger. Now it's 90,000 square feet. It costs $300 million. And the East Wing was in the way. So they did last week go tear down the East Wing. The whole East Wing is gone. So this won't be right up. There's going to be a new East Wing portico or corridor to connect to it. But this big ballroom is going in there. It's going to have a monstrous footprint. I think it's just his legacy to say, here's something I built. Because he likes that kind of big grand stuff. And, you know, everybody doesn't know the history I just went through. Everybody doesn't remember all these things and who put those in. You may not even know they happened. But everybody's going to remember that Donald Trump built this ballroom. I'm certain it's going to be called the Trump Ballroom because he's not naming anything after anybody but himself, right? So it's just his legacy. And he probably won't even be in office at time to have a party there. But that wing will stay there at least 100 years and people always know where it came from. So that's it. That's your debrief for today. Thanks for listening. Watch. Leave me your comments and tune in again soon.